Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for joining our webinar sessions today, which we are focusing on how to prepare and lodge taxable payment annual reports and making it easy with GovReports. Presenting today's webinar is Alee Cochran, a registered BAS agent who has been a customer of GovReports for many years, and she would be very familiar with our process. So hopefully you can pick up a few tips on how to prepare and lodge TPAR easily. Before we start, can I get a raise of hands if you can hear me? Great, thanks Patrick, Scott, thanks Vicky. Good, it sounds like everyone's can hear me. The webinar is being recorded and will be posted on the website by tomorrow morning for those who want to revisit at your convenience or for those whom cannot make for today's sessions. During the session, if you have questions, please send them through to the chat box so we can attend to them during the question time. So let us get started. Over to you, Alee.
Okay, thank you very much, Tiana, and welcome everyone. So today we're going to look, as Tiana said, at the Taxable Payments Annual Report, or commonly known as TPAR. So what exactly are we going to look at today? Well, we're going to look at what the TPAR is, how to enter TPAR contractor details manually using GovReports, how we can import the contractor details, how to send the TPAR for authorisation, and how to be able to track your TPAR lodgement once you have done so. So some businesses and government agencies are going to need to have to lodge a TPAR. You lodge a TPAR for payments that are made to contractors for services. Now currently, the following businesses have to lodge a TPAR where contractors or subcontractors have been used to provide services. So the industries most commonly using are building and construction, cleaning, road freight and courier, information technology, security investigation or surveillance services. Now there are also some government agencies that need to also report now about government grants and things like that. And the lodgement is usually due by the 28th of August each year. So I'm going to move across into our GovReports. So you will see now that I am on the dashboard of the GovReports system. Along the left here, you can see the area to navigate where we have our clients, lodgements, and about our Office Practice Manager system, the My Practice. I'm currently on the My Clients area. If I was to choose the bird's eye view, I would get a very quick summary of what is happening in my GovReports file here. But going back and clicking on My Clients, when the client list appears, you'll see here that these are 4 active clients, and it tells you along the top the status of your clients. Now in the actions here, we're going to go and open this client, Chelino. So when we open, you'll see that we have a range of information and a range of tabs that are showing, such as overview, ones that have had lodged, things that have been lodged in the past, who's got access permission, if it's linked with the ATO accounts, we can synchronize, and there's a whole range of things here. But the area we're going to look at today is where do we go to get our TPAR report if we're going to do this manually. So whilst we're in the client here, you'll see this forms area. And down here, you'll see the Taxable Payments Annual Report, and you can select this. So when you select it, the top section should pre-populate with the name of the client and their details, their ABN, their telephone number, etc., the contact name, the address, and things like that. The areas we need to look at is our reporting information, our contractor details, and later down here you'll see our supplier details. So in here, the first thing we want to do is, what year are we reporting on? So we're entering this manually, we're just clicking on here and choosing a year. And when we choose that year, you'll notice the report period automatically populates with the financial year. Another thing that's important to note is that you'll have an amendment indicator, and you'll notice you have a payment type is either payment or grant. So this is the ones where they have to report on grants as opposed to just reporting on contractor payments. And the amendment indicator we'll talk about a little bit later. The next section we have is where you add in the contractor details. So we've chosen the year. At the moment, it is ticked to the option of payment. If I was to tick this, it would move it to grant, to payment at the moment. It's not an amendment. And I'm going to choose to add a contractor. I could import a file, which we'll talk about that shortly, or I could choose to roll over data from a previous period. So in here, I'm going to add a contractor in. So now I am presented with the fields for filling in the contractor details. Now I need to put in an ABN number. I'm just going to put in a name. The business name, it might be Jason's Renovations. And if it has a trading name, you could put that in there as well. Now the business or the postal address, if it's an overseas address, you'd tick yes and have that in there. But in here, I'm just going to put, 52 Smith Street. And I'm just going to choose Mascot, New South Wales, whatever the postcode of Mascot is. I can't even remember. Let me choose a different one. There we go. Let's choose this one here. Now in here, I need to input the financial institution duties. If you hold on for 1 second, I've just got to shut a door because there's some background noise that's interfering. Apologies about that. Sometimes people in the home make too much noise. So in here, I'm going to enter the details of the bank accounts. And I've pre-populated some of this, like it'll pop up with stuff I've typed in before. So that's why I'm very easily able to pick up those numbers there. And it's really important with the telephone number that we put in the area code as well as the phone number. Now, in here, you have an option to indicate whether a statement by a supplier was provided for not quoting an ABN. Gianna, can you expand a little bit more about this field?
Maybe Sandeep can be best explain this this option.
So usually
Can you hear Sandeep, Ali? I didn't
No.
hear him. No.
can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay. So this one, usually when the contractors don't have an ABN and the employer did not generate an invoice or invoice with the ABN is not given on their invoice, then they need to make it as no.
Okay, so this is...
If you could go to that question section, question mark on the right hand side, we have given the explanation.
Okay. So if they provided a statement for not quoting an ABN, and okay, so you've got a little bit of information here about this one. I'm just going to leave it set for no at the moment. In here, I'm going to put in the date of the payment. And I'm going to choose, I have a choice of choosing between a payment or a grant at this stage. And I'm just going to say it's a payment. Now in here, this is the total tax withheld where an ABN wasn't quoted. So if there was no ABN quoted, you should have withheld at the top rate. But in this instance, I don't have that situation for this person. I'm going straight to my GST, and it was $100 worth of GST on this transaction. and $1,100, including the GST, for the total amount. Now at the top here, I have this amendment indicator, and I'll talk about the amendments a little bit later, but at this stage, this is a brand new one. It's not an amendment. So I click on my Save button. Now when I do that, you'll notice now I have my contractor details down here. Now I can go through and do my next one. Just going to go back a section. So in here, this will show us that you'll get an error coming up if we finish entering everything in. If you haven't completed something, you will get an indication if you may or may not have missed something in the process. I'm only going to put one contractor in at this stage. So you can see I've got that information now. And so I'm ready. Here's the details of the client, their contact details, and down the bottom here, this is the supplier, down here, we're going to tick that we declare that we've prepared this in accordance with the information, the signature of the BAS agent or tax agent who is preparing the lodgement, and the date. And now I have an option to do a couple of things. I can save this as a draft. I can validate and save it. So if I validate and save it, it sends it out and tests that all the fields are correct. I could validate it and send it for signature. Or if I had their consent elsewhere and I'd sent it in some other format, I could lodge it straight away. Now, the ones that I always use are the first three. I always want to get the validate and send for signature using GovReports. It makes life much easier. It makes it straightforward. I can track whether someone has signed, and I will only lodge once I have that authority to do so. So at this stage, I'm just going to save these changes. Now, when I go back here to my lodgements and I go into saved reports, you'll see now that I have this one that I've just done. And because I've only saved it, it's listed as draft. Scott asked a question. Yes, there would be several payments to report for the year. Actually, absolutely, you would have multiples. So you would be entering them one after another to do so. And I just have entered one just for the example, for the sake of not doing 100 million bits of data entry today. But yes, you would have multiple, and you may have multiple contractors as well. So this draft status means I still have to do something with it. I can't just send it off from this state for signature. If something is in valid status, that allows me to open and send it off for authorisation. And we'll talk about that a little bit more. What I want to move on to now is to show you, we just did that manually. But what happens if we are actually using software and we can download the file from our software, whichever package we might be using? Then how do we bring that in? How do we import that in? So we go back again to my clients, and I'm just going to choose a different one this time. Go to my forms and I go to select. I have the same process at the moment. I'm choosing my year, but this time I have a choice to import either a CSV file or the software generated CNN files. So this means I could bring the files in. Each software will do things differently, but say, for example, QuickBooks Online will give you a CNN type file. You can also have a CSV file that you can create and import as well. So if I was to import that file, I just want to show you some of the fields. I'm going to flick across to this tab here. that if there is a TPAR template, a CSV template that you can download from the GovReports website, and it shows you all the different fields that need to appear in the file. So you can see here the surname, the given name, business name, trading name, etc. Some of that stuff that we've seen already in that file. Gross amount paid, the total tax when withheld where there was no ABN, total GST, payment type, date of payment, name of grant, if it's a grant, statement by the supplier, etc. And you can see that information that you need to have for your CSV file. If I open up a CSV file, and I'll just move this across to the screen if it will let me. I'm just going to minimize this a little bit for a second to show you. You'll see here that this is, when you open it up, there's your ABN. Here's the ABN of the entity. And here are the details that you have to complete. So you could complete this and save it as a CSV file.
For those people that, for those that have been reporting TPAR in the past, we recently updated the TPAR form because the ATO has new categories of reporting, and that's what, as you can see in the form itself, the format is different, and also now not only the payment is accepted, but also the grant. The grant is normally for entities that are government entities that receive grants for the contractors. And that's why it is. So if you've been using the existing format, the CSV format, please make sure that you have updated the new CSV file format and use that format going forward. If you have been recording the contractors during the year and with the existing file, just copy and paste column by column with the right column. So if it's ABN column, just copy all the ABN in one go, and then etc. And those columns that do not apply to you, just leave it alone.
Okay, and I'm just going to move through to show you on the PowerPoint. And I've just got to find where it is. Bear with me for a moment. It's on this one. So in here, we've been through this stage here where we've gone through, we've opened the form, we've got to here, and we're choosing now to import, and you'll be able to upload the file here if you're uploading a file. And then when it's imported here, it comes up this way. It tells you, it reads the file, it tells you that it's found 2 valid ones, and you click on the import, and then you are able to open the report. So then, going back to our screen, assuming that we have imported everything correctly, we would have that information displayed, and we would go through the same process. We open our report and we'll see all the contractors listed there. And we would go through the same process again at the end when we're happy with it, in doing our declaration and sending it for signature, saving it as a draft, or validating and saving it or lodging it. And down the bottom then, once you've done that, you would click on, you know, if you chose validate and send for signature, and it's not going to do it because I've got nothing there, I would click submit, and it will then come up with our next stage. So if I choose to validate and send for signature, I'm going to show you what it does, and I'm going to exit this screen to actually go to a valid TPAR that I prepared before, sort of like the cooks who prepare their things before in the oven. If I go to my lodgements here in the saved reports, I can see that I have this valid one. So when I click on this valid, it comes up, and in the options here, I have the option, was valid. You just go back to choose the right one. Valid. I'm going to go to edit. It should have come up with the, oh, because I've already sent it.
You already sent it for signature.
I've already sent the signature.
Yeah, so it's in draft.
Let me go back to the other one, the draft one. I was testing things this morning and I went a bit too far with my my thing, I'm going to go through into my digital authorisation and get rid of that one, so I've got the valid one back again.
Yeah.
So just waiting for this one, and that is that one. I'm just going to delete one, and I'm going to go back now to my saved reports, refresh my screen, and it should be just valid. So when I click on my valid, dropping down here, I can now choose to send it for signature. Now, if I'd been on that other screen before where I went to this validate and save and validate and send for signature, I could have sent it from there, but as I had no valid data in there, I'm choosing to do it this way to show you what will pop up the same way. So when I go send for signature, it will now come up. It's uploaded that file. I need to put in an email address. Down here, the default message that will appear, you'll see here, and you'll have the placeholder name. You could change that, you could override it. You'll see that we're pleased to include your taxable payment annual report. It's recognised it's a TPAR report. And you could put any other comments that you want to have in there. And what it's done then is you'll see here that we've assigned this person to be the signee. So when they receive this email with the attachment, they'll be prompted to sign it, and they'll have to get a security code. We've chosen that they have to get a security code. This is the benefit of using the Send for Authorisation, the authorisation tool within GovReports, a digital authorisation. It allows that security information to pass securely, and someone has to get a code in order to open it, access it, and sign it. So I'm going, in this case, I could also have chosen in here to set a specific security code, or I could have chosen no security. I wouldn't choose that one. But if I choose to set a security code, I'm going to have to send them the information somehow so they know what the code is. I'll go to my next screen. And now I will be prompted, I will see a summary of what my TPAR actually is going to look like at the moment. And at this stage, you can see here that there's this floating X with me. It's waiting for me to place this X where I need the signature to go. So in here, I'm doing the set the signature location. Now, if I also was someone who had to place their own signature on there, then I could also click on the place my signature, and I could have that form signed somewhere else as well. If I put it in the wrong place, I'm not happy with it, I can remove the signature and replace it where I want it. And then I will click to send for signature. So now I'm taken back in here in my digital authentication area, digital authentication area, and I see the status of all the documents that I have got ready to out for signature. I've got this one which I've actually sent off, it's pending the signature. This one here, it needs to sign. This one here is only, these ones are only in draft, and this one has actually been signed. Now, what I do with it, depending on what what the document is, I normally, once I have lodged the returns, then I'll come back to this screen and I'll actually archive my signed one. So I can always keep track in here of at what stage the digital authentication is at. But if I also want to see at what stage my lodgement is at, I need to look at the My Lodgements, and I look in my saved reports. So at the moment, you can see now, this is the one I created earlier that I didn't send for signature, and this is the one we've just sent off for signature. So you can see it still has a valid status, but it's pending a signature. So we're waiting for the signature to come back. Now, once that signature does come back, we are able, it'll come up and change the signature here, the status, to signed. When we have signed, we are then able to tick the little box here and click on Lodge Selected. Now that's going to send it off to the ATO. And just like any BAS return or any other returns you lodge, STP, whatever you may do, tax returns, you will get a receipt that will come back from the ATO. Once you've clicked that lodged, the status here will change to processing. And only when it's completed will it come out of this saved reports and move into the history area when it's been changes its status to lodged. So you have a great way of being able to keep track of your lodgements, both from when you've actually lodged it with the ATO, but also up here in your digital authentication area, so you can see the status of where signatures are at. Now, I would go through this regularly because, say, for example, it's been a week and I still haven't seen the signature come back. I would go through and send off reminders, and I would click remind to get people to keep on going through and having a look and reminding them that they have an obligation to get this lodged and we want to get it lodged. So I use that reminder very frequently. I often find that when you do some lodgements, such as BAS lodgements, very early in the piece, very soon after the quarter has ended, some people know that they've got plenty of time before they have to pay it yet, and so they don't sign it and they sit on it for a while. And so I go through at least once a week and use this as a reminder to sign it. I want to see, the only thing I want to see in here is really, I'd like to see a blank screen to make sure that everybody's, you know, signed everything and we've lodged everything. So this is how we go through. So once again, just to highlight how you access your TPAR, choose your client, go to the forms, select the taxable payments annual report. You'll find the information pre-populates, and here you choose your financial year, and you can see here that you can go back a few years as well. So if you're catching up with historical data, you'll find you can do that. Now, the thing I do want to talk about this time is the amendment indicator. Say you had already lodged your TPAR, but you discovered that there was an additional payment that was omitted. You can go through and submit an amendment. And if I'm right, Tiana, you only need to submit the amendment for the contractor that has the change. You don't need to resubmit the whole file. Is that correct?
That's correct.
So in here, I would add in that extra, I would say that yes, it's an amendment. I want to change it to yes, and you'll get this popping up just to warn you that you're saying it's an amendment. And I'm going to add the contractor in again, and we're going to use the same person. It was Smith Street. Oh, my mouse is gone. 2020, yeah. And then I put in 02 and the BSB account number. And this time it was the 31st of May. Um, 2020, and this time it was 200 and it was 2200, and I could save it. So at this stage, if I was happy with all of this, I would go through, now just say that's the only amendment I need to make. I could go through down here, tick the box here, and from this part, I could click on the validate and send for signature and click on submit. and it will take me to my digital authentication. Oh, it's not going to let me do that. It's having a do that. And it will take me through that same screen that I accessed the other way before and go through and send off in the normal way. If I don't go and if I get distracted and I have to come back to do this, I can save this as a draft. If I've made a monumental mistake, I can discard it. If I do discard it, when I go out of my digital authentication and I go back to my saved reports, you will find the saved report will be sitting here as valid, waiting for you to be able to go through and send it for signature. So just because you discard it at the digital authentication stage does not mean it deletes your report. What it does is the report will sit here in the saved reports, and you could have saved reports in draft stage, valid pending signature, or processing. So you could have it in a multiple number of ways. Is there any questions so far? Tiana, is there anything else you'd like to cover off in this?
Not really. I think you covered well. I think the common errors that we normally see with coming through when you know, business lodging TPAR is that one is that they don't feel previously they don't need to, you know, like there's a lot of contractors that do not have all the details, so they might not have the ABN or they might not have the address and things like that. So in this case, with the new format, will that still be accepted, Sendip? With this new format?
So still you can lodge without an ABN, you can get a warning.
It still come back with a warning. So in the past, like if you've got contractors that did not give you fully all the details and the employer has paid out, but without all the details, then the lodgement still goes through, the lodgement will go through, but they'll come back with a warning.
Yeah. So you get that option here, yeah.
Mm.
And just a reminder though that obviously, you know, we're dealing with our with clients who are dealing with contractors, and they have usually can have quite a volume of contractors going through. But one of the processes that in our practice and that I encourage my clients to follow is whenever they have a new supplier, is that they fill in some sort of paperwork to give their ABN and their details, and that then you go on and check the ABN lookup to ensure, number one, they've provided you with a valid ABN, and number two, that they are registered for GST if they've been charging you GST. I can give you an example in a construction firm that I used to do some work for. I would go in and I would do the monthly accounts, or fortnightly I go in and do the work, and then at the end of the month, or at the end of, we'd get everything going through, we would check the supplier ABN numbers and things like that. And what we found when we checked one of those ABNs was a supplier who had, and I checked the ABNs, they'd been dealing with this supplier for some time. What I found when I checked the ABN is that even though they were charging GST, they were not registered for GST, so they had been pocketing an extra 10% all the way along. The other thing to note as well is that if an ABN hasn't been provided, the ATO will come back to you to collect the difference, or to the client to collect the difference between what should have been withheld and remitted to them as to the fact that that wasn't withheld and remitted to them, so that they are ensuring that they're getting that money from somewhere. And we had a couple of instances in the very beginning when the TPAR reporting started. You know, we had a couple of instances where numbers were transposed, and the ATO would come back with their queries to check, and they said very clearly that if it was not a valid ABN, then it would be treated as if it was no ABN, and the client would be forced to pay the difference to the ATO. So these are some of the things that you might put in practice when you're setting things up, when you take on any new contractors, any new suppliers, that you are checking that they have a valid ABN and that they are registered for GST, to avoid these types of issues occurring at the time of doing your TPAR and reporting.
Just on that query, Ali, my question is, if a contractor is being a little bit of a smart A and is given an ABN that is not his, so when
they're given an ABN that's not theirs.
Yep.
Yeah.
I've seen cases where that was reported to us that the ABN belongs to like another business and given to the employer to make a payment on a written invoice. What would happen?
The ATO will come back to you. They'll query it. They'll come back and query it, because when they go through their matching process, which they do, they will be trying to match the ABN to their records that they have for the business that holds that ABN, and they will come back to you on the queries. And then you're going to have to follow up quick smart, or you're going to be the one who's going to get stuck with having to pay the ATO. As far as I'm aware, that's what I've been led to believe.
Okay.
That's why I always use the ABN lookup. I check every supplier that I put on in a file for any of my clients, any supplier at all, whether it's a contractor or not. I check every single one through the ABN lookup. And quite often you might have someone who has transposed a number, or they've given you a number that was their trust fund one, which was not the actual trading entity or something like that. So yeah, always check, because the ATO certainly does. They have the capability of cross-checking the validity of the ABNs. I mean, if you look in the software packages these days, when you are entering in, say, tax file numbers for employees, when you're entering that into the accounting software packages these days, it comes up and tells you straight away that it's not a valid tax file number. How does it know that? Because there's formulas and stuff in place that, there's things in place for checking that at the time of entry. So we should be doing the same thing for the ABNs.
It's exactly the same. And with GovReports, you can do that. When you enter the ABN or tax file number, you can do validate with the ATO.
Yeah, so if you go and enter something incorrectly, if you're setting up a new client, it does. I believe when you set up a new client, you'll get that too, won't you, Tiana? When you set one up and you go and put a wrong ABN. So if I put in 111111111, it'll come up and tell me it's an invalid. It's invalid. So enter a valid ABN.
That's correct. And if you do enter the correct ABN, it will preview with the entity or the organization name that is registered with the ATO.
Yeah, and then
so
you've got the
Yep, so when you upload this TPAR file with the contractors' ABNs, our system will also validate and will tell you that there's an issue if it's not a recognized ABN registered with the ATO.
Okay. That's about all I have, Diana, unless there's something else you can think of.
Yep. On the other issue, in the past with TPAR, ATO used to accept up to 129 records per transaction. I think with the updated that I've been updated with today, there's no more limits as to how many records are on the TPAR file. So you can re-upload. Previously, you got more than 129, our system will automatically split the file into multiples of 129 records. And then you would have to validate them individually or individually and lodge one by one or lodge separately. So going forward, that will be no longer the case.
You're a bit echoey there, Tiana. I don't know if it's percent in the background.
Not too sure. I was having the same issue. Okay. Yep. Did you hear me well, or do I need to repeat that?
Repeat that, just about the limits and disappearance of the limits.
Yep. There's no records limits going forward.
Yeah, in the past there used to be a record limit, and so it used to break the file up into multiple files. Going forward, the ATO has eliminated that issue. So you can have as many contractors in your file as you need, as many lines in your file as you need. And you'll often find that you know, you can have some quite large files when you have a large volume of contractors, especially in the construction industry. So,
what about the real estate industry, where they engage cleaners throughout the year to manage, to clean up their clients' properties when when there's people moving in and out?
I'm not sure that they've been caught yet by the TPAR reporting requirements. Cleaning services certainly comes under it, but I'm assuming that that's the head cleaner who employs the contractors at this stage. But I would expect, as it started off just with the construction industry, I would expect that we would start to see this expanding across multiple industries. So eventually, everyone who employs contractors would have to be reporting. After all, it is the ATO's way of cross-checking to ensure that those subcontractors or contractors are putting in their tax returns and they are fully declaring the income they are receiving. It's the cross-check way, and I have heard of instances of people being caught out even for minuscule dollars. I've heard they've been caught out. So, yeah, I think that this will expand a lot more. I would be surprised, especially with COVID and how the working arrangements of people have changed, and there may be a little bit more flexibility for people to contract rather than necessarily be full-time employed. I would think we would start to see this across a range of industries and services, not just construction and industries, but also service-based industries, a lot more.
I think currently we already have seen that they've included the cleaning industry, but as well as the IT, security, and now government agency who engage contractors in their departments.
Exactly. Exactly, and that's a massive expansion. It started with one, and it's expanded, a lot over the years. So we'll see a lot more though. Okay. I'll be surprised if they don't bring in hairdressers and others like that shortly, and restaurants. So we'll see.
Do we have questions from anyone? Okay, it looks like it was pretty easy and pretty straightforward, Ali. we have no questions so far. So anyway, thanks Ali. And if you do have questions after the sessions have ended, and which we might not have covered during the webinar, please do not hesitate to reach out to us. We'd be more than happy to, if we can't answer, we pass it on to Ali, but otherwise we'll get back to you and let you know. Once again, thank you, and we look forward to see you again on the next webinar. Thanks, Ali. Thanks, everyone.
Thanks very much. Bye, everyone.